Nobody told me the Veshan Nebula would smell like copper. That was the first thing. The life support recycled the same processed air it always did, of course. I know that. But when the Ardent slipped her bow into that gas cloud, and the forward sensor arrays began drinking in the ionized particulates, something in the ship's ambient resonance shifted, and I swear I could taste metal on the back of my teeth. I was 22 years old, 11 weeks out of the academy, and I was sitting at the secondary comm station on the Ardent's observation deck, trying very hard to look like I belonged there. I did not yet belong there. The UES Ardent was a cathedral-class carrier. The designation sounds ceremonial, and the shape earns it. 2 full kilometers from wingtip to wingtip along the transverse arms, another 800 meters along the spine from bow to stern, with the command tower rising from the intersection like a steeple above a crossing. In open space, she read on sensors as something between a city and a geological feature. In the Veshan Nebula, in the first week of the survey transit, she was invisible. The ionized hydrogen columns in that cloud absorb active radar, scatter LiDAR, and play havoc with thermal signatures. The Ardent could have been a ghost. For 14 days, she effectively was. My job on the secondary comm station was passive monitoring. 14 frequencies, 4 of them alien band. I was to log anything non-standard, flag anything that repeated at intervals, and call Chief Warrant Officer Hess immediately if anything sounded like structured language. Chief Hess had been on the Ardent for 11 years. She had walked me through the station on my first day with the patience of a woman who had trained 20 junior officers before me and expected to train 20 more after. She showed me where the coffee was and where the log buffer was, and told me in the same quiet, informational tone that the secondary comm station had never once flagged a structured alien transmission in 11 years, and that was fine, and that my job was to be ready in case it did. On the 14th day of the transit, at 0318 ship time, the station flagged a structured alien transmission. I did not call Chief Hess immediately. I am not proud of this. What I did was sit very still and listen to it repeat 4 times, because some part of my brain needed to be absolutely certain it was real, before I woke a senior officer in the middle of a night watch. It was a tonal pattern, low, layered, harmonic. 3 distinct voices braided together, each cycling through a phrase and returning. It was not random interference. It was not instrument echo. It was a choir. I called Chief Hess. She was at my station in 90 seconds, and by that point the signal had bloomed from one source to 6, then 11, then 23. She put on the secondary headset, listened for 8 seconds, and reached past me to open the command channel without a word. Captain Orvain was on the bridge in 4 minutes. He was a compact, gray-haired man with the manner of someone who had been interrupted many times in his career and had made a private peace with it. He listened to the playback, looked at the expanding source count, 31 by then, and said, very quietly, "All stop. Passive sensors only. No active pings. Nobody transmits." The Ardent went still. What the passive arrays assembled over the next 40 minutes was this. A fleet of 41 vessels had emerged from a fold in the nebula's western column, approximately 600 kilometers from our position. They were moving at a ceremonial pace, slow, deliberate, in a formation that had no tactical logic but considerable geometric elegance. The lead ship was the largest, a tapered ellipsoid roughly 400 meters long, and it was broadcasting that choral signal from an array of emitters along its hull. The other 40 vessels were arranged in concentric arcs behind it, each one broadcasting its own harmonic layer, so that the entire fleet was, in effect, singing. I pulled what I could from the database. The Vakari Convocation, a theocratic interstellar culture with territory roughly 40 light-years, spinward from our survey corridor. Old spacefaring civilization. No prior confirmed contact with Terran vessels. Deeply ritual-bound. Their stellar navigation was organized around sacred passage routes, corridors of space deemed holy by their canon. The Veshan Nebula, according to one fragmentary xenographic note filed 9 years earlier by a survey drone, was listed as a probable pilgrim route. They had no idea we were there. The Ardent was sitting in the dark at the far end of their sacred corridor, 2 kilometers wide and utterly silent, and 41 Vakari pilgrim ships were sailing straight toward her at 3 kilometers per minute. Captain Orvain stood at the main display and watched the closing distance tick down. He had his hands folded behind his back. Chief Hess was beside me at the comm station, and I remember that her posture was perfectly straight, perfectly professional, and that her jaw was set in a way I had not seen before. The captain spoke without turning around. At current approach, how long until we're within their passive visual range? The navigator answered, 11 minutes, sir. Possibly less. Their forward array appears to have optical capacity. He nodded slowly. Then he said, they're on a sacred route. They didn't choose to find us. We're in their path. He was quiet for a moment. We will not let them stumble into us in the dark. He turned to the helm. Bring us about. Full broadside to their approach vector. And light us up. Running lights, nav beacons, hull arrays, everything. The Ardent turned. I have tried many times to describe what it must have looked like from the lead Vakari vessel. I cannot, not really. I was not on that ship, and what I experienced was from inside the Ardent, watching the sensor returns and the displays. But I know what the Ardent looks like from outside because I have seen her from a shuttle, once, hanging in open space with her hull lights on. And she is not a thing that the eye dismisses. 2 kilometers of cruciform hull, every deck edge lit with white running lights, the transverse arms blazing in the dark, the command tower glowing amber from the viewports and gold from the beacon arrays along its spine. She does not look like a vessel. She looks like something that was already there when the stars were young. The Vakari choral transmission stopped. It stopped between one breath and the next, all 41 sources, simultaneously, between 1 second and the next, as if a conductor had brought down a baton. The frequency went from that layered harmonic singing to absolute silence in a single moment. I was watching the signal monitor when it happened. The waveform just flatlined. 41 ships, not a carrier signal, not a residual tone. Silence. 6 minutes passed, and nobody on the Ardent's bridge spoke. At the 6-minute mark, the lead Vakari vessel transmitted on a single frequency. Low, solo, and very slow. Not the choir. One voice. One phrase, repeated 3 times with a pause between each repetition. Chief Hess ran it through the translation suite. The suite returned a single-word match with a confidence interval of 71%, flagged as a ritual term from the Vakari sacred canon. The translation, a word their theology reserved for use in the presence of the divine. The Ardent held position. The Vakari fleet began, very slowly, to turn. All 41 vessels, not a retreat. The passive arrays tracked their vector, and they were not accelerating. Not scattering, not going evasive, they were turning back the way they had come, in their same ceremonial formation, at their same deliberate pace. Orderly, reverent, they folded back into the western column of the nebula and were absorbed by it, and in another 8 minutes their signals were too attenuated to resolve, and then they were gone. Captain Orvain let the silence hold for another full minute after the last return faded. Then he said, "Log it, non-engagement, survey transit corridor, no shots fired, no hostile act. No communication attempted." He looked at the empty display where 41 ships had been. They went home. He walked off the bridge and said nothing more. I filed the log at 0541. I wrote it in the flat, procedural language the Navy requires. Signal intercept. Alien fleet, 41 vessels. Probable Vakari convocation designation. Mutual visual contact established. Fleet withdrew on its own initiative. No communication, no incident, no casualties. I did not write that hearing 40 ships go quiet at the same instant was the most affecting thing I had encountered in my short life, or that I understood in that moment, not as a lesson, not as a briefing room abstraction, but as a physical fact settling into my chest, what the Ardent was, what she meant, what it meant to be aboard her. I did not write that I had wept quietly at my station and hoped Chief Hess had not seen. I think she had. She never said a word about it. That log entry is archived somewhere in the Navy's survey database. 4 lines long, and it does not come close to what happened in the Veshan Nebula at 0318 on the 14th day of the transit. But I have carried the sound of it with me for 31 years since. The way a choir of 40 ships can stop between one breath and the next. The weight of that silence, and what it meant that we were the reason for it. The Ardent taught me things early that most officers learn late, if they learn them at all.